we had a Republican debate.
Those were my Star Wars Legos that I hid from you guys that are now falling off the back of the bookshelf.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's so good. Okay, we're going to be talking about the Republican debate.
Yeah.
And what happened? Was it important? What was its importance? And then kind of how do people feel coming out of the debate?
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds like a good agenda to me. We'll probably go all over the place.
Yeah, we're going to go all over the place. This is going to be a riot because I watched it live with two friends of mine who aren't very politically active. They're not very into politics, but we were all watching it and we had a blast. I thought, right off the bat, Vivek Ramaswamy captured everybody's attention immediately. When everyone's going down, giving their opening statements, Vivek Ramaswamy looked right at the camera, looked right at everybody, and he's like, I'm a fresh new face. All these other guys broke everything. I'm going to come in. I'm going to fix it. I'm America first. Donald Trump is the best president ever, but I'm going to be better than him.
Yeah. The crispness and directness, even towards the camera, with which he delivered his messages really screams that he believes everything he's saying. He speaks with a lot of conviction. He has a ton of confidence. And that's definitely something that was missing from a few of the other candidates.
Oh, definitely.
At least.
Compare Vivek Ramaswamy's opening statement to Ronald Meatball DeSantis's opening statement.
Oh my God.
It's not comparable.
Yeah. So I think DeSantis obviously is coming into this as the leader in the polls of the people on stage. Trump chose to skip the debate because he's blowing everyone out in the polls. And so the expectation was that DeSantis would be targeted the most, that he would get the most time speaking on the stage, and neither of those things happened.
No.
And right out the gate, I thought he was so, socially inept.
Socially inept is the best
Almost.
word.
So I wrote a bullet point about it, and I really appreciate myself for this description. I said, DeSantis is like a poorly tuned machine. The droids in Star Wars are just as inhuman, but far more likable.
That's so perfect. The droids are funnier and have more charisma than Ron DeSantis.
Yes. Every time he was asked to speak, you could tell that he was reading straight off something that he had memorized.
Yes. So this is so perfect. My interpretation was, it's like his mom wrote all the index cards of all the things he needed to say, but he dropped them and he didn't know the order in which he had to say them, but he knew he had to say all the cards.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I did feel that way about everyone at some point in the debate, more or less. It mostly, near the end, there was a question about education. I think it was to Burgum. Bigger picture, there were 8 people in this debate. 2 of them didn't matter. One was Burgum, one was Asa Hutchinson. And afterwards, they said they were going into this lightning round and they all asked a question, I think, about Trump. I forget exactly what it was, but everyone else used their time to talk about education and completely ignored the question. And
Totally.
It was the same type of thing. They just didn't care. They were like, I have to get this out there.
Yeah. I think Chris Christie didn't do that as much, right? Because Chris Christie went in there with a very direct purpose. He was like, I'm going to badmouth Trump, and I'm going to show why all these other people up here are spineless in running against Trump because they're not willing to call him out on his bull. You know what I mean? I think that was his mission going in, and I think he accomplished it pretty well.
I have a different take
on
Christie, because he did badmouth Trump, but I think he specifically took this as an opportunity to do other things. Because I feel like everything he's shown in the media thus far is his bad-mouthing Trump.
Sure.
And he's trying to brand his campaign that way. But he is like, okay, now Republican voters are actually listening to me. And he probably figured out very early on that the audience for this specific debate was pretty Trump favorable.
Oh, yeah.
So I think he leaned more into, I have a lot of experience. He was like, I beat a Democratic incumbent in New Jersey. I was governor for 2 terms in a deep blue state.
Yep.
He fell back on some of his credentials, which I think was a good idea. Everyone knows that Christie's anti-Trump already.
Right. Him going in being like, I am the guy who was able to get things done, even with a Democrat Senate and a Democrat House in New Jersey, means that I am the guy to lead a conservative movement post-Trump.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
No.
Right. I mean, obviously it's not going to work. But when I looked at some of the polls that came after the debate, talking about who won, Ramaswamy topped the list. Right. Ramaswamy was at the top. It was like
number
32%. 32% of people thought Ramaswamy won.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go down, and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie tied for second at like 22, 25%.
Who do you think won?
That's a good question. I think.
Okay, and not so. This is a question in two facets, I think.
Yeah.
Who do you think won as far as you as a viewer of the debate?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think won as far as appealing to potential Republican voters?
I think Nikki Haley won both.
Okay.
I think Nikki Haley won both.
I think Nikki Haley won as far as me as the viewer.
Yeah.
I think Vivek won as far as appealing to Republican voters.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that's what a lot of Republican voters are saying. Vivek did great. But I want to give some insight into, my parents are Republicans. And so then when they watch the debate, I like to call them and talk to them and try to get like their gauge of how the primary is going, right? So I call my mom and she's like, I love Nikki Haley and Bo Burgum. And I can't believe that somebody on this planet likes Bo Burgum. Yeah.
His name is Doug.
Isn't it?
Unless his nickname is Bo.
No, his name is Doug. I was thinking of Bo Burnham.
Yes, you were.
So to talk about how forgettable this guy was, his name was Doug Burgum. No, his name is Doug Burgum.
Yeah.
And he was the governor of North Dakota, as you were just talking about. My mom liked him a lot. And then she said, I love Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley was great. Nikki Haley was strong. Nikki Haley was knowledgeable. And then I talked to my dad, who's way more pro-Trump. And he said, he's like, I think all Republicans need to get into a room and come to the understanding that Trump is just too unpopular to ever win again. Nominate Nikki Haley and win with her.
Wow.
And yes, so that coming from my dad, who's a big-time Trump supporter, now saying I am actually open and kind of want a Nikki Haley who I think could beat Biden. Like, he is now prioritizing electability over someone who I guess is like his preferred candidate.
That's really interesting.
It's super interesting. And it makes me nervous because I think Nikki Haley...
more Republicans do that.
Yeah, because I think Nikki Haley is a very strong contender against Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's internal memos even say, like, Nikki Haley is the one we're afraid of.
Really?
Yeah, they're really scared of her.
Okay.
And they should be. I think Nikki Haley is scary.
Yeah.
And one more thing I want to say about Nikki Haley. She comes off as like this fairly moderate person. She's almost like, she's not actually. Like, she's actually on Social Security. She's the most radical person on that stage. She's the only one that has come out actively and said, I want to raise the retirement age for all people under 50 from 65 to 67. She's the only person out there talking about it.
And I think she's flexible even on that 67 number. I think she's completely willing to push it higher.
Oh, she's totally willing to go up to 70.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is she says, like, we need to take into account, life expectancy. Life expectancy in the United States has dropped the last 2 years. And now you want to raise our retirement age? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's what she's pushing. So from her perception comes off as moderate, but her actual policy proposals are anything but.
Yeah. It's funny because I think that's true in some ways on foreign policy. See, it's so funny because to me, foreign policy just feels like a right or wrong thing more than a left or right thing. And on this stage, you had a clear divide over Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which was pretty much Vivek versus the field. And Vivek said that he thinks that we should not give any more aid to Ukraine, that we should freeze the lines where they are right now and give Russia whatever amount of Ukraine that they've invaded so far. Everyone else says, no, we have to take this stand. We need to keep providing support to Ukraine. So she's good there. I think one interesting point that she made with relation to China was the connection between our clean energy revolution and how it subsidizes, quote unquote, China. There were occasional points, like actual policy points made in this debate that I thought were kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that one definitely has weight. I would say it is true.
Yeah.
Like, unequivocally, China has much more capacity than any other country in the world to produce solar cells and other green tech that countries need, including the US, to make this shift from fossil fuels. And I just wanted to call out for a moment because though I agree with it, I think it's completely missing
what's happening right now.
Yeah, well, it's missing the point that that climate change is a much bigger deal.
Okay, yeah.
Than, like, it's more important for us to combat climate change than worry about giving a little bit more money to China. And that's why I think Biden's policy of being very specific and restricting high tech exports to China is the right way to go.
Yeah, I mean, look, when the Republicans on the stage were asked about climate change, I think this was a pivotal moment for the Republican Party because a young Republican, 18, 19 years old, was brought on screen and was able to ask a question. This was the only audience-driven question of the entire debate. A 19-year-old asks, everyone in my generation is scared of climate change. What is the Republican Party going to do about it? And all of them pretty much say nothing.
I think I really want to be specific about what happens.
Okay.
Because they ask the Republican candidates to raise their hand if they believe in human-caused climate change.
Yes.
And before any of them can, DeSantis says, "We're not in the classroom. Let's have a discussion like adults." And to me, that just screamed there was a memo to him early in, like, before this debate that he could not be pinned down on this, like that he could not be seen taking a hard stance on whether climate change is caused by humans or not. So because of that, none of them actually were forced to say whether they believe in human-caused climate change.
Yes. None of them did say that they believed in human-caused climate change after that, but they
Mhm.
were not held to the feet to the fire to raise their hand because DeSantis basically bailed everybody out by interrupting the process.
Mhm.
And then Vivek comes out and he says the entire climate change agenda is a total hoax.
Yes.
And the entire auditorium of the debate room it does two things. Because initially, the first thing Vivek says is, he says, everyone on the stage is bought and paid for. And then the whole crowd starts booing, right?
Mhm.
Everyone starts booing. And then he says, the climate change agenda is a hoax. But the boos from that first statement are carrying over.
Mhm.
Because believe it or not, these people still like DeSantis. They don't think DeSantis is a sellout, and they don't like the fact that Vivek is calling him a sellout.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people online talk about how that moment is the audience booing Vivek for not believing in climate change, but that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all.
Mm-mm.
Everyone in that room was in agreement that human-caused climate change is not a problem.
Mhm.
And that's a pivotal moment. Like,
Yeah.
what are you telling the next generation? This 19-year-old came in. He's like, I'm scared. My classmates are scared. We see the effects of climate change, and we know that our lives are going to be different and harder because of what's happening. What are you going to do about it? And they said nothing.
Well, the thing with Vivek is interesting because to me, it was another example of him really knowing the audience. Because Vivek, I mean, I've watched several of his interviews. He's on every podcast all the time. Literally, this man probably does 7 hours of interviews every day.
He was on 2 Sunday shows this morning. He was on Meet the Press and the CNN Sunday show. I don't know how he does it.
I think he just sits in a truck probably and puts up a green screen. But on many of these, he has publicly acknowledged that climate change is real and that it is caused by humans, which is why he was very specific in saying the climate change agenda is a hoax. And as I saw it, I was like, oh, of course. But I will say, we've talked about climate change briefly on this show, and it is a point that I think at least is worth thinking about how far gone we are with climate change. And when you hear Vivek get more into specifics about why he thinks how he does, it does kind of sound like what he's saying is we have a much better, like what he says, there's a much better chance of us using fossil fuels to adapt to our changing climate rather than stopping their use and trying to reverse climate change. So I guess first I'm curious how you would respond to that, because I think there is some validity at least to the assumptions under that point.
I don't think that that's true. I think if every nation does not work to hit net zero and work to cap their carbon emissions and reduce them as much as possible, right? If every nation doesn't work to accomplish that, the effects of climate change just get worse and worse and worse, and then they start tumbling, and the effects get exponentially worse the deeper we go into this. So I don't think we're going to be able to outpace and adapt past the effects of climate change, because there's a huge difference, as we've talked about, between 2 degrees Celsius and 2.5 degrees Celsius. If we get up to 4 degrees Celsius, there's nothing we can adapt out of that.
Yeah.
That's the entire Middle East uninhabitable, period, end of story. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
So I don't agree with his framing. I saw an interview with him on CNN after the debate, and he said that if he's like, less people have died from climate change disasters than dying of the cold or dying, or dying because of the cold. So we should just have more fossil fuels to heat more homes because it's more of a, that's missing the entire point. We're not even in the, we're barely in the beginning prologue
Yeah.
of the climate change effects. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So
Totally.
yeah.
The whole point is supposed to be not to get to 1.5 degrees Celsius past pre-industrial levels. We are around 1.1. Models say that we reach a tipping point for our global system after we hit 1.5, where we might go into something like that's where the polar ice caps melt.
And then and then we start just gaining heat rapidly after that.
Exactly. Like we don't even know, like we can't even model it because we've never had an Earth like that. So I think you're right. I understand the concerns that we're like, and I was having this, I texted you somewhat recently that I was having a really like climate catastrophic day. And I was just listening to stuff and really, if you listen to stuff, even on the left, it's like measure after measure, goal after goal, we're way behind what we should be doing.
Yeah.
Like to make a dent in the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning, we need to be building like the amount of clean energy facilities that were built in half a year in the second half of 2022, like every day for the rest of the next 20 years. And I don't know, I guess I understand the enormity of the task, but there can be no more important task to take on.
Yeah, I mean, the important tasks are always hard. And there needs to be, I mean, we've talked about this all the time, but there needs to be a general mobilization of the entire American and global economy geared towards reducing the effects of climate change and stopping the climb of temperature as much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, Obama gave an interview a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, where he was like, we need to, talk about, we might hit 2 degrees Celsius. And we need to even understand that just because we hit 2% doesn't mean that we can become complacent to hit 2.5, because 2.5 is way worse than 2 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Now, when I watched the interview, I was initially mad at him because I'm like, I don't even want to get to 1.5 degrees Celsius. You're already pushing it over to 2%. You know what I mean? Like,
you said percent twice now, 2 degrees.
2 degrees. It's like, I don't even want to get to 1.5 degrees. And now you're already pushing the goalpost to 2.
Yeah.
It's like you were in charge for 8 years. It's like it's a disconnect of his responsibilities.
Yeah, I totally hear you, but I guess the reason it makes sense is because of this kind of rhetoric on the Republican side.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do when half the country doesn't believe in it, right? What can you genuinely do? It's not even just, I think it's less than half the country, because I'm not convinced that Republican voters, all of them, I'm convinced that there is at least 15% of Republican voters who understand that there's human-caused climate change.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's more than that. I think the question is whether they think we should do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But so back to the debate, because we went on a massive tangent here.
Which I still enjoy.
Right. Of course. That's the whole show.
Yeah.
But Nikki Haley's rise is very interesting to me. Asa Hutchinson, irrelevant. DeSantis, a clown.
Yeah.
Mike Pence. I actually left that debate with a greater amount of respect for him than I thought I was going to.
I agree. I think he performed quite well. I would say he was probably the third best after Vivek and Haley.
You want to give that to Christie?
I guess it's close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a toss-up between the two of them.
Because when Mike Pence talked about January 6th, which is the next thing that we need to talk about at this debate here, when he talked about his role on January 6th, I was honestly like kind of like, there was like a sense of a little bit of patriotism coming out of that, where I was like, yeah, you did defend the Constitution. And I was like, I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
I hate Pence for pretty much everything, but for that one thing, it's like, good. I'm glad you did that.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And it was nice hearing him defend himself in the face of an audience that was booing him.
Yeah.
And in the face of other people on the stage who really hated him. And Vivek is a prime example of that. Vivek was going in on it.
I think Vivek was the only one, right? I think everyone else who was prompted said that he did the right thing.
Christie was a little because
No.
because Christie criticized Pence because Pence wouldn't totally say that he wouldn't vote for Trump.
Yes, but
So then Christie is like getting mad at you. You're like, why would you say he's a threat to the Constitution and then vote for him again?
sure. But Christie did say you absolutely did the right thing on
Yes.
January 6th.
Oh yeah, of course, on that angle. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, Vivek was attacking him from one side, Christie was attacking him from another.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Pence sounded leader-like.
He did.
Right? Like very composed,
Very stoic.
very poised. Yeah. You can see why they would like you could see why he would be liked, but I can't think about someone who is more of a contrast from Trump.
Oh yeah, he's the total opposite of a human being. I mean,
Yeah.
Trump is bombastic, loud, inconsistent,
Politically incorrect.
politically incorrect.
Yeah.
Pence is calm, stoic, consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looks humble, right? The opposite of a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe that to be on a fly on the wall on the conversations in that administration must have been so funny.
Well, I assume Trump didn't take any.
Yeah, Trump probably. I can't imagine Trump even talked to the guy very frequently.
No. Have you seen Veep on HBO?
No,
ever?
I haven't seen Veep.
Well,
You're such a lib.
Veep is nonpartisan.
That is not true.
Veep is totally nonpartisan.
No, it is not.
Yes, it is.
Go all of the memes about Veep online because watching Veep is a meme.
I'm sure.
Yes,
But I mean, but because the point of Veep is to be making fun of political incompetence, but just like the memes come from because Republicans happen to be more politically incompetent. Although I would expect that there's been a lot of Kamala Harris Veep memes.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I just bring it up because she's never in the room with the president.
Right.
Like the president makes an appearance once a season. Maybe that's how I imagine Pence was.
Yeah. And then I want to talk about, let's talk about the abortion thing, right? Because
Sure.
abortion was a very, very interesting part of this debate.
Mm-hmm.
And Nikki Haley, I think, answered the question perfectly. When they're asked, are you going to do an abortion ban on the national level? Nikki Haley says, it's not even possible. We don't have the 60 Senate votes to do it. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not worth talking about. And Mike Pence on the other end of the spectrum is like, I am pro-life. I'm the most pro-life congressman, whatever. I will push for, a national ban.
But that was very notable to me is that Pence and DeSantis were very unspecific. Like
They didn't give the time frame.
They didn't give anything. They were just like, I will be the most pro-life president ever.
Well, Pence did say, I will impose a national standard maximum.
Yeah.
Right? What that weak number is, we don't know.
No, he said once the baby can start feeling pain.
Right.
So I specifically looked that up.
Oh, good.
Like 24 weeks, right?
Wait, really?
Yeah. Which is completely
Isn't that the standard of Roe?
reasonable.
That's
yeah,
the Roe standard.
Exactly. It's completely reasonable. They're literally lying and saying like Democrats are pushing for legal abortion up till the time of birth. And I looked at these stats, like there are almost no abortions that happen past 24 weeks. And if there are, it is almost always because there's a threat to the life of the mother.
Yeah. Yeah, a direct threat to the life of the mother is the only reason you have like a late term abortion. Otherwise, they don't happen.
Yes, so they're just making up an argument on the Democrat side because they want to make themselves seem more righteous.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, exactly.
But Nikki Haley's and Pence's argument over this, Pence is like, you're not being pro-life enough, and Nikki Haley is so politically tactful by saying, I'm not even going to touch the issue. Because it's not going to happen no matter what, because we don't have the Senate votes.
But she also did allude to a more pro-choice government stance, I would say. Like,
yeah, I think she did.
Legislative stance.
And that's smart.
She was like, I am unapologetically pro-life, but she was like, I don't really feel comfortable having the government say anything about what happens to a woman's body.
Yep. And then right after this debate, Joe Biden puts out an ad, a 1-minute ad, talking about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And he quotes Trump. Trump says, I'm the guy who got Roe v. Wade overturned. Goes after DeSantis, passing the 6-week ban. Goes after Tim Scott. We didn't even talk about Tim Scott yet.
No.
It doesn't matter, I guess. Tim Scott.
I do want to talk about him. But
okay. Tim Scott saying that he will be the most pro-life president ever. Nikki Haley isn't in that 1-minute ad because she has been very politically tactful as to not really touch that third rail that will burn her.
Yeah.
And that's super smart because Democrats are going to run on abortion.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. So yeah, so Scott was specific at saying a 15-week federal ban. We can talk about Scott briefly for the rest of the debate. I thought it was really bad.
Really bad.
Really bad.
Shockingly bad.
Like stilted. Like DeSantis, it kind of seemed like everything was written for him. Uncomfortable. I'm trying to think of more adjectives.
Uncomfortable is the good one.
Yeah.
Because he really looked just scared.
Yes.
Right? He looked scared.
Yeah.
I wish. Do you have anything else to say about Tim Scott? Because I honestly don't.
Uncharismatic is the last adjective I would use.
Yeah, he's very uncharismatic. I was shocked that people attacked Vivek so much.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that they were going to go after DeSantis.
Yeah.
DeSantis has the most amount of people to pull from, right?
True.
But they decided to go after Vivek.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting. No one touched DeSantis.
Well, it's funny. We talked about this, like we texted about this. I think Vivek has a much better chance than DeSantis to take the nomination. He's better betting odds right now to win the presidency. I think anyone who's intelligent can kind of see the writing on. I mean, we've talked about this for weeks, right? DeSantis is going nowhere. He's obviously a nothing burger.
Yeah.
So Vivek is the one who can actually inspire something and maybe get the ball rolling into a real chance at winning this thing.
But then what I want to talk about from the opposite side of Vivek, because last time we filmed, we talked about Vivek in a somewhat positive light. I want to talk about him from a negative light.
Sure.
Because he's a guy who wants to get rid of the Department of Education. He wants to get rid of the EPA completely.
FBI.
He wants to get rid of the FBI. He wants to get rid of the ATF, the agency that's dealing with firearm regulation. This is like not funny.
Mm-mm.
The government won't be able to function properly if this guy gets in office, and that's the point. He uses this phrase, he wants to destroy the administrative state. That is directly out of Steve Bannon's playbook. And Steve Bannon is a far-right guy, publisher of Breitbart.com, and eliminating the administrative state is his first objective, Steve Bannon's. And Vivek is out there pointing this out directly and taking his talking points and taking his objectives for his own. And imagine getting rid of the FBI, getting rid of the Department of Education. The Department of Education, EPA, ridiculous.
So Vivek is going to destroy the administrative state. And the one thing I'd add is that it's scary because it seems like he has the competence to actually execute on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he was on Meet the Press this morning. I'm not only a nerd who reads The Economist, I'm also a nerd who watches Meet the Press every Sunday morning. And he said that there are rules protecting civil servants from getting fired. And there's rules that you can't just fire people in the government. You have to go through somewhat of a process. He's like, well, that doesn't apply to mass layoffs. And that's what I'm going to do. Mass layoffs, not individual firings, mass layoffs. That's what I'm going to bring to government. What a nightmare.
I
understand
really
if you guys out there might be anti-government or something or a little bit, okay? And you might be a Republican, you want a small state. These jobs matter a lot. You don't want a guy who's going to completely defund and de-teeth the FDA.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not something you want. Whether you know it or not, the reason you're not having diarrhea every day is because the FDA is making sure what we're eating is relatively safe.
Yeah.
Okay?
Exactly.
So please, God, don't trust him.
He is scary.